Hello, everyone. In May this year, voters in 6 regions across England have elected. Oh, the sound is terrible. Thank you. Metro mayors. This idea, from what I understood, behind this devolution was to increase regional economic planning. And there are similar experiments around the world, such as France here. We call it Communauté de Communes, or Federation of Municipalities. To discuss this topic, really fortunate to have with me Steve Rotheram. You're the mayor, the Metro Mayor of Liverpool City region. You're a former Labour Member of Parliament. And soon his birthday. And Andy Street. Andy Street is the mayor of West Midlands Combined Authority. And of note, you were previously the managing director for John Lewis from 2007 and 2016. This is important, a businessman. So I want to kickstart this exchange with one question to both of you. And devolution at that level is seen also in Europe, in Latin America. And my question is this a sign of the times? Like population seeing local power as more able to address their needs, central government facing budget constraints, a pushback versus perceived threat of a too globalized world? Gentlemen.
I think we might have different views on this, but mine is very much that it is a reaction to political systems, certainly national political systems, that I saw with my own 2 eyes in Westminster, that I believe were too narrowly focused around an agenda that normally concentrates more power, more resource at the centre. And there are huge swathes of the north of England who have felt for a long time under governments of all different political persuasions, but we've felt left behind. And I think what happens is when you get that political disconnect, it ends up where a country takes a catastrophic decision to withdraw from the European Union. And a lot of people that I've spoken with voted to leave because they thought it was firing a shot across the bows of politicians to listen to them. Unfortunately, they don't get a second chance now, if politicians do listen to them, to reverse that decision under the current system. But there certainly is a huge feeling that the London centricity of the United Kingdom has led to a call for people to have decisions taken at a much more local level.
You agree with that, Andy?
To a point. I mean, the truth is there was some call for this locally, some call for more autonomy, but the real driving force was a view in the British government that London had been an incredibly successful city, arguably the most successful city in the world, but other cities had been, by their international comparators, less successful. So this was all a question of how do we actually share that success across more of the country, and actually by giving more authority to the regions, that should come about. There's also a feeling actually about they wanted an individual in charge in each region and a clear plan for that region as well.
Okay, so you've been both directly elected. What difference could it make? Because we could see also yourself as an additional layer of authority.
And that's the real danger, isn't it? That there are 6 of us, our colleagues are also here with us. So there are 6 metro areas, all with devolution deals that have a core that's similar, but there are additional powers and resources to different areas. So the core is very similar, and the real danger of devolution is that it becomes devolution of blame, because if we don't get the right power and resource and can't do the things that we want to for our individual areas with a more bespoke approach, then you can imagine that people will start to say that it's just another tier of failed bureaucracy. And that really is the worst of all worlds, because not only individually as politicians might we not get a second term, but the experiment might well fail.
So it is an experiment, and that's exciting, and mayors have worked around the world, so why not in the UK on this basis? But I'm always very clear when people say to me it'll cost, it's another layer. I say, judge in time, this has actually got to more than pay for itself. And I think already we can see the results, the benefits in some areas, well, across all areas of the country, frankly. So I'll give you an example to really bring this home, that all of our individual councils, local authorities, they have their own plans, but they did not work together for the benefit of the region. So if you take one of the biggest issues facing Britain at the moment, sufficiency of housing supply, they were sort of locked in a fatal embrace. Who was actually going to move first to allocate housing numbers? And the truth is, the combined authority has come together and has enabled them to work together, and we now have the outline of a plan to deliver significantly many more houses than would otherwise have happened.
So, beyond this very example that you're citing, what's the interest of it? Is that pooling resources? Is that, you know, making people talk? Is that it? Just it? Or could it be more to that?
It can't just be about money, because we'll never have enough money no matter what the government is. So we are looking at the agglomeration effect, so trying to get the synergies of 6 districts in my instance. I think it's more in yours at 7, yep. And some of the others are less. But it's trying to get those individual parts of the city region working better together, knitting the whole process so that we can start to see some of the benefits of the powers we've got. For instance, in my area, transport, as in other areas, is a huge issue. And we get some powers where we can look at the re-regulation of our bus service network. And if we start to pull local transport plans together so that fulfills the need of the population, the next step is to join the great cities of the north up, and myself and Ben Houghton, who's also here with Andy Burnham, have started to look at where we can work with the government so that the north gets a fair share of funding infrastructure. For every pound that we get, the south gets 6. And whilst I don't decry them the opportunity to get there, we need more so that we can join up a northern corridor to start to rebalance the whole UK economy.
I think my answer on the interest would be, if you asked residents or businesses across the West Midlands, they would say, we need a plan. We need an economic plan for this region. And truthfully, we've not had that before. The scale of the region's about the same size as many of the countries that are in the EU in their own rights, about 3 million people. So we're really thinking, how are we going to have a successful economy to compete in the future? Which are the new industries, and how do we make sure that we've got the skills for that? And ultimately, the judgment will be, do we build a new economy that is more successful than other parts of the UK and international cities?
Andy, you were a businessman before. So my question is, what skills does your job require? That of a businessman? That of a politician? That of a diplomat?
Well, the great thing is coming to this as a businessman, because I think some of the people say it's very different, politics and business, and I'm not sure it is that different, actually. The first thing is about assembling your team, and spent time over the last few months making sure we've got the very best of people in our team, both from the private sector, the best people who've run government, the best people who've run local government as well, assembling that. So that judgment of people is probably the most important skill of all. The next thing is then holding them accountable. This job is all about delivery, and I will be judged on whether we manage to deliver, and that means you've got to deliver through your people. So giving them the headroom, clear plan, communicating it. And one last thought on this, the most important skill I think I can bring is actually creating the sort of public support for difficult issues. So one of them definitely facing us is the whole question of pollution in our cities. Public opinion is pretty split on what to do with it at the moment. I think you've got to show leadership in driving people to an outcome, and that's exactly what you do in business when you're running a strategy for an organisation as well.
Oh my gosh, Steve, how are you doing? You haven't been a businessman before, so... Yeah,
I have actually. I've owned a small business that I started myself, and
there you go.
When I was 21. So yeah, there's some of that experience that you bring to the role. But I've been a local politician and a national politician. I'm back now to this role, and I saw that the Westminster bubble fails to really address the needs of areas like the one that I represent. And I think the connections that you're making in Westminster are the things that we really need to build on. Of course, I agree with a lot of what Andy said about building the team. In fact, Mike Bloomberg said it when we were in New York. He spent the first 100 days when he was in his first term as Mayor of New York in building the right team, and that's the foundation by which we'll all be judged because of delivery. but we have to foster better relationships, not just locally, but we have to do that as 6 Metro mayors so that we can work cross-party to try and get the government to really respond.
How would you describe your relationship with the UK government? Do you have any? Who do you report to, by the way?
I missed the first part of that, sorry.
Who do you report to?
Report to?
Who do you report to? Who's your boss?
And the second part of the question was, what's the relationship with the UK government? So we might have different interests on there, different answers to this. So I only report to one group of people, ultimately, and that's the electors, and I'm very clear. It's a directly elected position, and they will judge me. I have no formal reporting line to the UK government, even though I happen to be of the same party as the current UK government. The relationship with the UK government, it's love and hate at the same time, actually. So they've got to get behind our plan, and frankly, they still control some of the levers, but and in that sense, we're trying to win their support and confidence and investment, but equally, we've got to be provocative and say, we're not just going to implement your thinking, we've got to actually think originally and be challenging where that's appropriate.
Steve?
Who do I report to? Well, normally it's the wife, but beyond that, it'll be the electors, of course, the same as everybody else, and the relationship with the national government. I'm from a different political persuasion than the national government currently, but I worked very closely with the current Prime Minister for many years, and there is a bond of trust. And in conversations that I've had with her and the Chancellor and lots of other senior ministers, they are very keen to ensure that the experiment is successful. So they are looking, for instance, at what we currently have and whether there are gaps in the powers that we have got through our devolution agreements that can be enhanced, and where other areas may well become devolved to local areas. So it's not love-hate, because I don't love them at all, but I don't always hate them.
Okay. So it's been 5 months. Do you have already frustrations regarding your mandate, the powers that you don't have and wish you had?
So did everyone hear the question? Are there any frustrations after 5 months over powers?
Yes.
And my answer is there are new powers we would wish to have. I'm expecting to get more powers, but there's no point being frustrated by it, actually. I'm a great believer that you have to make a go of what you've got. And there's a huge piece around soft power here, actually, and about the opportunity to represent your region and win for it, even though it doesn't say on the job description, this is your role. So I think actually there's a sort of piece here about if you're bold yourself, you fill the space, almost in our case, because no one's filled it before. So we're not sitting there waiting to be invited into a formal power.
And this is where, again, I slightly differ. I am very frustrated at times. There's a specific department, well, I'll say who it is, it's the Department for Education in the UK government that I don't think have grasped the opportunity of looking at what the potential for devolution to the regions would mean. We are probably the people who are best positioned to look at what the skills needs of our areas are, and unless the government, and certainly the Prime Minister, pushes the agenda right the way through the whole of the government system, then we've got a big chunk missing from what we need as the tool to really start to make a difference. It's the next generation thing that we need to be looking at as well.
We don't have much time left. My last question to both of you is, how do you plan on establishing the role over the coming years? Bold, fill the space?
I think the role will be judged by what I said about 5 minutes ago, actually. Do we have we established an economy that delivers for the people of the West Midlands? And in our case, it's actually back to one of the big themes of the conference. Can the success of the region be shared better amongst everybody? The previous presentation about the affluent parts of a city and the poor parts of the city, that is so, so relevant to the UK. And that is something I personally think we'll be judged on in years to come.
Okay.
And 17 years ago, Ken Livingstone was elected as the first mayor of London, and not an awful lot of people, I would have said, would have known about what a mayor actually is for and what it does. If you ask most Londoners now, they'll know that it was Boris Johnson, and they'll know that it's Sadiq Khan currently. We need to get to a position where people start to look at us as that civic leader, as the person who is going to really take the whole thing forward, to provide that vision. if you ask people in the West Midlands, do they know Andy Street yet, or Steve Rotheram in the Liverpool City region, our recognition is not at that level. And we can only get that recognition, which means that we'll get the buy-in of the people if we start to articulate where we're taking our individual areas. And I think we've all got different visions, but it's all very exciting. And I'm really looking forward to 2020 when we test this out at the next mayoral elections.
Okay. So here we have two very honourable gentlemen who told us that this devolution actually was both a reaction to the political system that have been in place in the UK, and it was too narrowly focused around a central agenda. And he pointed out, though, that even if there was some call for more autonomy from the local population, it's also about spreading the wealth. London initially used to focus all the wealth around itself. Now it's about time that it's actually spread around the rest of the country. Being directly elected means legitimacy, means also you ultimately report to your voters. There's a risk that your position could be seen as an additional layer of authority, but Andy points out that it's an exciting experiment and that it's going to pay for itself. And already, even as it started only 5 months ago, you can see it with the housing council authorities in your region, which are brought together actually and sort of start to deliver what is expected from them. The interest is not just about money, as Steve pointed it. There will be more benefits. There will be powers on regulation, local transport plans that are being put together. It's also about economic planning, of course, like it never happened before, as Andy pointed out. These two gentlemen have skills. One used to be a businessman at John Lewis. You also had a touch of business methods, but nevertheless, the most important skill, Andy said, was to create public support. You are held accountable. You also know how to manage a team. That's very important. There's a bit of the soft power element that is important, as Andy said, you have to be bold. You have to feel the space. You just can't sit there and wait to get instructions. There's a bit of a frustration here, but it's just 5 months. You should perhaps want to give it a chance a little bit, Steve. And as both gentlemen said, the ultimate judge will be the greater good that they will have delivered to the population of their respective regions. Thank you very, very much. Merci beaucoup. Thank you.